He's a 21-year raw food vegan. He's the architect of Creating Perfect Health System, a Reiki master, a certified permaculture instructor, a children's book author, and according to those who know him, an all-around great guy. So without further ado, please help me in welcoming Mr. Loren Lockman.
Okay, well, this is a little strange with the microphone. Let's see, can you all hear me without the microphone? No. Okay, we'll use the microphone. How's this? Good. Okay, good. I'm going to try doing it this way. I like standing still very long. Put that over there. So it's great to see you all here tonight. Thanks for coming out on this haily, snowy, rainy, sunny night. This is Arizona for you, I guess. Arizona's an amazing place. I live in Costa Rica. Some of you probably know that. And it's a humid climate, so I didn't realize how incredible Arizona was until I went back into the bathroom today several hours after I'd used a washcloth that was dry. In Costa Rica, that would take 3 weeks to have. So this is a really amazing place. So it's great to see you all. This evening's talk is entitled An Introduction to Creating Perfect Health. And often when I talk about perfect health, I get some of the same blank looks I'm getting right now. You know, I get some funny looks because most people seem to think that perfect health is not really possible. Right? How many of you think perfect health is not really possible? Anyone think that? It's okay to raise your hand. Yeah, there's a few of you here. You know, what I want to point out, though, first of all, if you look around in nature, at the millions of other species in nature, perfect health is the natural condition. It's what we see all over the place. Perfect health is the natural condition of every living species. It's our birthright. Can you hear me okay in the back? Okay. This is our birthright. Now, needless to say, if you're walking down the street of Ahwatukee, I love that name. I'm considering changing my name to Ahwatukee. Now, there are people named Denver and Austin and Orlando. Why not Ahwatukee? So if you're walking down the streets of Ahwatukee, you probably don't see a lot of examples of perfect health, do you? Maybe none. You'd have to stand on a corner a long time. So it's not hard to understand why most people think this is impossible. But I want you to understand that it is possible. And if we can't get to perfect health, we can come pretty darn close. Okay? And what I want to do this evening is share with you a little bit about why I believe that's possible, what I've seen happen, okay, what it is we can achieve. And I want to start by explaining something. Katie, the lovely woman who was behind the counter, has been calling me doctor ever since I got here, and I tried to tell her once, and I don't think she heard me. I'm not a doctor. I've played doctor behind the garage, but that was a long time ago. And I'm not a nutritionist, and I want you all to know that I don't have any professional credentials, except that I've helped more than 4,000 people achieve an amazing level of health. Now, for some people, that doesn't mean anything because there isn't a piece of paper that that says I'm credentialed. And if that's a problem for you, I completely understand. You're welcome to leave if that's what you'd rather do. I just want you to know right up front. One perspective, though, one way of thinking about this is something Mark Twain once said. He said, "I never let my schooling get in the way of my education." You know, some people that come in with a professional background have trouble ever seeing beyond that. Like, people that are medical professionals sometimes. So I come with a completely different perspective, completely unburdened by that professional education. What I've learned from experience, both with my own body and in the bodies of the people I've worked with over the last 20 plus years. And so I didn't study health formally. How did I start doing this? And I'll tell you, it's not really an unusual story, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but when I graduated from college, which was almost 30 years ago now, within about 6 months, I found myself very ill. And at the time, I grew up in a conservative area outside of Washington, D.C. All I ever knew was Western medicine. So I went to my doctor. I worked for a commercial real estate company. We had a medical plan. I went to my doctor, and I'll tell you, I was later diagnosed, and this was much later, several years later, I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, irritable bowel syndrome, chronic sinusitis, systemic candida infection, and 57 allergies. And so I was 23 years old, and I'd never been allergic to anything before. I was 23 years old, and I was sicker than anybody I knew. But I went to my doctor, and the doctor was able to diagnose the sinus infection, and some of you probably can guess what I was offered for that. Anybody?
Antibiotics.
Antibiotics, right? Now, antibiotics, they work, don't they? Absolutely. Yeah, the sinus infection disappeared for about 15 minutes. Okay, because the way these things work, anti is against and bio means life, they destroy the bacteria in your body, which are the primary engine of your immune function. So there's no symptoms because they've killed what's making everything happen. But you don't get better, you're just suppressing symptoms. And is anybody surprised to hear this? I mean, I think everybody here probably knows that that's really what medicine is about, right? Is anyone not aware of this? So, again, just in case, medicine, all medicine really does is suppress the symptoms of disease. Now, most people would probably think that's a good thing. I mean, we have enough people here tonight. There's one or two of you, you don't have to raise your hand, but there's a couple of people here that probably like pain. just one or two. Right? But most of us don't like pain. And so if you don't like pain, and you've got a symptom, you don't feel good, you probably want to do something, if you can, to make that symptom go away. And you're happy if someone comes along and says, take the stuff, and the symptom will be gone. And those things work, don't they? They make you feel better. But there's a problem that most people aren't aware of. Now, there's a problem that many people are aware of, and probably everybody here, most of you probably know, that all pharmaceuticals are poisonous. Is anyone surprised to hear that? All drugs are toxic to your body. Okay? That's why there's all the side effects. In fact, it's the toxicity of the substance that creates the therapeutic effect. Your body is reacting to it in such a way that it makes you feel better because your symptom is suppressed, but it's only happening because your body has literally been poisoned in some way. Okay? I just this morning, I was driving Julie's car. Thanks, Julie. I was driving Julie's car running some errands. I like to eat. Julie doesn't really eat much, but I decided it would be good to have a couple apples and oranges in the house. And so I went out to buy some food, and there was an ad on the radio for some drug. And there, the side effects, and it was like, I'd never heard it so nonchalantly before. Oh, and you might die. And by the way, you might die. If you die, then you probably want to stop taking this stuff. So the reason these things cause these side effects is because they're poisonous. The problem that most people aren't aware of is that the symptoms that we experience throughout our lives are actually evidence that the body is cleansing or healing. Now, some of you probably didn't know that. So let's look at an example. Have you ever woken up with a head full of mucus? Everyone's probably had this experience, right? Why is your body creating this mucus? Maybe it doesn't like you. Right? Maybe it's pissed off because of what you did last weekend. You know what I'm talking about? No, probably not. What's going on is your body's creating the mucus to encapsulate something that's toxic so that you can eliminate it more readily and so that the substance won't harm you. So your body is making the mucus on purpose for a good reason. And what do? What do most people do when they wake up with a head full of mucus? They go to the medicine cabinet, they take out some product that makes the mucus go away. And they feel better, but what have we just done? See, the human body, this is like the single most incredible, intelligent organism, and yours is like number 2, on the planet, right? The human body has virtually infinite intelligence. And we've now taken something, like the body had this idea, I need to create this mucus so I can prevent myself from being poisoned, so I can get the stuff out. And we've taken away its best way of dealing with this substance. What's it going to do now? Right? We've eliminated the best way of dealing with it. So what happens? We feel better, but we've actually ensured that we're going to be more toxic as a result. Does this make sense to everybody? And so it occurred to me just a few years ago, I've been doing this a long time, and it occurred to me just a couple of years ago that the chronic disease that actually kills most people in our culture, cancer and heart disease and stroke, etc., we're creating that every single time we suppress our acute symptoms. We're creating chronic disease because we're ensuring that the body becomes more toxic, because it still has the toxins it was trying to get rid of in the first place, and now we've added to that with the substance we were taking to eliminate the first problem. So it's more toxic than it was before. Okay? So it took me 3 years. I went to 3 doctors over 3 years, and they all told me the same thing. Each of them diagnosed the sinus problem, and each of them gave me multiple courses of a broad spectrum antibiotic. And after 3 years of doing this 9 or 10 times, my immune system was much worse off than it had been when I started. They also diagnosed the allergies. Remember, I had 57 allergies. And that was easy. There's shots for that. But I declined to take them because I enjoy sitting down every once in a while. Right? So the other stuff that I was dealing with, the chronic fatigue syndrome, the irritable bowel syndrome, and the systemic candida problem, I was told by one doctor after another, 3 in total over the course of 3 years, that these things didn't exist. Now, some of you have probably heard the exact same story in the last year or two, because there's many people, many doctors are still telling people the same thing. Okay? But 20 years ago, even more than 20 years ago, nearly 30 years ago now, there were even fewer health professionals that understood that these were real problems that actually existed. In fact, it took me a while to figure out that it wasn't the doctor's fault that they couldn't figure this out. It turned out that each of these 3 guys, and they were all men, but each of them had the same condition themselves, not the same as me, the same as each other. Each of them, it turns out, was dealing with an omniscience complex. In case you didn't know. Omniscience means all-knowing. See, if you know everything and you can't figure out what something is, it doesn't exist. And so if you've heard from a medical professional before that your problem didn't exist, this is probably why. Okay? You go through medical school, you believe, perhaps, that you already know everything. And these were things they weren't aware of. But they're very real conditions. So I didn't know where else to turn. And, to be honest with you, I'm glad I didn't. I didn't know that there were all these alternative practitioners that exist. I didn't know they existed. If I'd grown up in Southern California, I probably would have known that, right? But I didn't know this growing up in Washington, D.C. And I'm glad I didn't, because it shortened my learning curve. It saved me a lot of time. See, I'm probably going to step on some toes here now, and I don't intend to, but it's bound to happen. Most of the alternatives to Western medicine are based on the same fallacious principles. I mean, some of you probably have, before I go there, let me point something out, okay? And you might have already picked this up from what I said a minute ago, but if you really want to create a high level of health, what you need to do is, A, stop suppressing symptoms, because they're there for a reason, and your virtually infinitely intelligent body has created them on purpose. And B, actually address the cause of the problem. Medicine doesn't do that. Well, guess what? Most alternatives don't do it either. So, how many of you know what echinacea is? Echinacea is purple cone flower, and you probably know that if you're catching a cold, you can take some echinacea and you won't get a cold. And your herbalist might tell you, no, this stuff is boosting your immune system. It makes you stronger. It makes you healthier. Well, that's interesting, because if you look, first of all, your herbalist will probably also tell you you should only take a certain quantity, no more than a certain quantity, each day, right? And with some herbs, no more than a certain number of days in a row. Why do you think that is?
Toxic.
That's right, because they are toxic. All medicinal herbs are toxic. Now think about drugs. Drugs originally came from where? Plants. They were just distilled down. They were more concentrated. Herbs are essentially a cruder form of drugs. They're toxic to the body. And I haven't looked at this book in about 20 years, but I used to have a book in my library called Peterson's Field Guide to North American Herbs. Anyone seen this book? Peterson makes a whole bunch of these field guides. And somewhere on the fourth or fifth or sixth page, and I'm going to paraphrase because I haven't seen it in 20 years, it says something like, warning, every plant in this book is toxic. This is all the herbs that grow in the United States. Every one of them is toxic to the body. How can something poisonous make you healthier? It does boost your immune system. I mean, if you consume something toxic, your immune system now has to work harder. And that's what it does. But do you think there might be a better way to get healthy than by consuming stuff that's poisonous to you? I think there might be. So I gave up on medicine because I didn't know about herbs back then. I didn't know about naturopathy and homeopathy and all the other opathies. Didn't know they existed. All I knew about was allopathy. And I realized that didn't work. And when I finally gave up on medicine, the only thing I could think to do was to go back to nutrition. And I'll tell you something a little bit unusual about me. I started studying nutrition at the age of 15 or 16. There aren't a lot of boys that do that at 15 or 16. I'll tell you why it happened, though, because this will make more sense to you. From the time I was 14 until the time I was 15, in that 1 year, I grew 10 inches. And I never gained an ounce. So I look like a stick with a nose. Okay? Some of you probably still think I look like a stick with a nose. You should have seen me 50 pounds ago. Okay? I'm not kidding. And so I'm 15 years old and my hormones are kicking in and I'm desperately wanting 15-year-old girls to find me attractive, but I look like a stick with a nose. And so I thought, maybe if I start paying attention to what I eat and start working out, I can build my muscles. And that's why I started studying nutrition. So here it is now, roughly 10 years later. I'm 3 years down the road with medicine, getting worse all the time, and I finally realized I'm going to have to figure this out myself because I'm getting worse every month with these guys. And so I thought maybe nutrition has the answer. Well, I went back to the nutrition text that I'd been reading when I was 15 and 16, and I was surprised to find, because I hadn't paid much attention, that according to these books, I was doing everything I should be doing according to conventional nutrition. And yet here I was, sicker than anybody I knew, now at the age of 26. And I thought, something's wrong with this picture. Why is this? And so I started thinking about conventional nutrition. And I came to some conclusions about that. And I can see you begging me with your eyes, so I'm going to go ahead and tell you what they are. I'm going to share this with you. I realized that everything we think we know about conventional nutrition is based on studying the bodies of average people. Isn't it? So, what do we know about average people? What do average people have in common? Well, 80% of Americans will die of cancer, heart disease, or stroke. And, although people seem to think like it was a big surprise, it just happened overnight. I mean, I remember once getting a phone call from a very good friend of mine. And I picked up the phone, and Joe, my friend, said, Loren, he said, I've got some really bad news. I said, what happened? And he said, my brother Johnny, and Johnny was 35 at the time, he said, my brother Johnny just died of colon cancer at the age of 35. The next thing Joe said was so absurd, I didn't really know how to respond. He said, and he was perfectly healthy. What do you say to that? So in case you didn't know this, right, this might be a surprise to some of you, You don't go to bed perfectly healthy and wake up dead with cancer the next day. It doesn't work that way. What happens is it takes 10 or 20 or 30 years to develop these conditions. So here's what I reasoned. If 80% of the population are going to die of these conditions, and it takes 20 or 30 years on average for them to develop, the average person walking down the street is a walking disease factory. What are we going to learn about what belongs in a healthy human body by studying the bodies of sick people? I mean, they're not sick because it hasn't been diagnosed yet. That's what most people think, right? I'm healthy until the day I get diagnosed. Then I'm sick. But how'd you get there? How'd you get from healthy to sick? It was a long process, but we don't recognize that. In fact, if we back up, back in the 70s, the World Health Organization was involved with many of the big world governments, big national governments in the world, because they wanted to define this idea of what is real health. And ultimately what they said was, many people were saying, it doesn't exist, you can't have it. There is no real health. But what they agreed on was that real health was when all aspects of your being and body are functioning perfectly. So raise your hand if all aspects of your being and body are functioning perfectly. You sir with the glasses on that raised your hand? Okay. Because when there's a boating saying, a rising tide lifts all boats. This may surprise you, but many of my clients no longer need to wear glasses. Okay? Because when you take your health to the highest level possible, guess what? It affects every aspect of your being. Every aspect. Now I know, how many of you here heard me speak in Scottsdale last year? Anybody? One back there. We were in a room in Scottsdale where there were slightly fewer people than here, but the audience was overwhelmingly older people. Probably not so unusual in Scottsdale. Every person in the room over 60, I asked, how many of you over 60 don't wear glasses? Nobody raised their hand. Okay, every single. So we think this is just what happens as we get older. Okay, but we're going to talk about aging, because aging is not what most people think it is. Most of what we think of as aging is completely unnecessary and can be reversed if we do what we need to do. I've seen it many times at my center, and I'm going to talk about that with you. Okay? So, nutrition, I realize, may not be quite as valuable to us as we think it is. And today I can tell you even more. If you look at conventional nutrition, any nutritionists in the room? See how many toes I'm stepping on here. There'll be one in the front here. Unfortunately, what nutrition talks about today, everything is looked at kind of like medicine. You have a problem with your thyroid, you see a thyroid specialist. You have a problem with your liver, you see a liver specialist, a heart specialist. How many holistic practitioners are in the room? Anybody? What does holism mean?
Encompassing all. Basically encompassing all.
That's right. I can't tell you how many times I've spoken to whole roomfuls of holistic practitioners where nobody knew what it meant. People would say things like, well, holistic, that means natural or alternative. No, it doesn't. Holism means one whole organism. And so you can't treat a liver or a kidney or a thyroid by itself because it doesn't operate by itself. It operates in conjunction with the rest of the body. And the same is true with nutrition. If we look at iron or magnesium as an independent unit, we're missing the point that all those things come to us in nature in crazy things we call food, whole foods, plants, and so forth. And we need to look at it that way. But I think there's a lot of problems with conventional nutrition because it's based primarily on looking at the bodies of sick people. And not just the bodies of sick people. Now, some of you, I think I heard in the introduction that I'm a 21-year raw vegan. That's a long time. I didn't know that. I can't really remember past last week, but it's true. 21 years in November, all raw vegan food. And I'll tell you something interesting because I became a vegetarian about 27 years ago, 26 years ago. And all my friends wanted to know, what? Where am I going to get my protein? Right, exactly. And then I became a vegan, and all my vegetarian friends wanted to know, where am I going to get my protein? Then I became a raw vegan, and all my vegan friends wanted to know, where am I going to get my protein? And then I went beyond typical raw veganism, and my raw vegan friends wanted to know the same thing. Okay? And so, and the crazy thing about this is that we've all been brainwashed to believe we need to worry about getting enough protein. So if you were going to develop the RDAs for protein, how would you do that? How would you figure out how much protein a human body should have?
If you're the beef industry, you figure how much do you need to profit, and then you tell people.
If you're the beef industry, yeah. But if you were an honest scientist that wanted to know how much protein a human body needed, how would you figure that out?
They can't exactly tell.
Study some healthy people. Maybe look at what people are eating and figure out, divide them into groups, people who eat this, who eat that, and see how they do. I mean, that would be one way. That's not what they did. Anyone know how the RDAs for protein were determined for the U.S. and therefore for the rest of the world? Because everyone uses the U.S.'s RDAs. The U.S. government decided what they would do is they would look to see how much protein a rat needs to be healthy. Any rats in the room? The health department hopes not. We're not rats. Rats grow much faster than we do, and they need much more protein than we do. Okay? So it doesn't make any sense. And then the government wanted to be very conservative to make sure everyone got what they needed, so they took the number they determined from studying rats, and they doubled it. And then the meat and dairy industry lobbyists came calling. And this all happened almost 100 years ago. It was like 85 or 90 years ago. The meat and dairy industry lobbyists came calling, powerful even back then, and said, hey, do us a favor. And so they doubled it again. So what we've all been led to believe is what we should be eating is 4 times what a rat needs to be healthy, which is much more than you need. Okay? You do need to worry about your protein intake. Because, as it turns out, there is a correlation between protein consumption and disease. But it's not what most people think it is. The more protein you consume, the higher your risk of disease. If you eat enough food, real food, that is, you get enough protein. You can't not. Okay, this isn't going to be a nutrition lesson today, but just so you know, protein is the building block of every living cell. So today I got most of my protein from oranges and blueberries. Yesterday it was from apples. Everything that's ever been alive contains protein. It has to, because you can't have a living cell without protein. And we need tiny, tiny amounts of it. In fact, I'll prove this to you very briefly. If protein is a building block of living cell tissue, at what point in a life cycle do you think an organism would need the most protein? When it's growing the fastest, right? At what point in our lifetime do we grow the fastest? In infancy, right? How many mothers in the room? Come on. Okay. So, how many of you remember your average baby's birth weight? You probably all know exactly. What was your baby's birth weight?
The first one, 5'10".
5'10". Small.
Small. She was about a month early.
A month early, that's small. 5'10". Anyone else? 11. 5'11", okay. 9'2", that's big. Wow, you had some drugs, didn't you? The average baby at birth, human baby, is 7 pounds. 7 pounds, that's average. Okay? 1 year later, anyone remember? 25, that's big. 20 pounds is average. The average baby roughly triples in size in the first year of life. Has anyone here tripled in size in the last year? You'd be trying to hide behind, the bathroom or something. You wouldn't be able to. You'd be trying to. That never happens again. So we triple in size in the first year of life, consuming ideally only what? Human breast milk, which must be mostly protein, right? Anyone know how much protein it has? On average?
2 to 5% or something like that.
2.5%. Actually, that's how much it has when the baby's first. No, the first couple days, it's watery, there's almost no protein. It takes a couple days for it to really come in. But that's where it is then. At the end of a year, roughly 1.5%. So that baby triples in size, consuming roughly 2% of its calories from protein. And the average adult here in Ahwatukee, I love that name, Ahwatukee, the average adult is getting roughly 25 to 30% of their calories from protein. Is it possible that we would need 10 to 15 times more protein than a baby tripling in size? I don't think so. Okay? We don't have to worry about getting enough protein. Make sense to you? Okay. So, I'd given up on medicine, and I gave up on conventional nutrition, and I didn't know where else to look. But I started thinking, I'd always been very close to nature. I grew up in a neighborhood where we had lots of woods, lots of nature around, and I spent most of my time in the woods, as much as I could, out in nature. I always felt more at home in nature than anywhere else. And I started thinking about what I shared with you earlier, that in nature, all these animals are healthy. And so I started thinking, you know, if every other species has a natural diet, there must be a natural diet for human beings. Now remember, I was going through this whole process just a couple years after college. At this point, I'm 3 years out of college. I'm still consuming an all-American post-college diet. Pizza and beer, right, for the most part. And not really, but they were heavy components. And, you know, I had to think, honestly, maybe these things aren't natural to my body. Maybe they're not helping. In fact, it occurred to me that anything that came in a package, anything that was processed in any way, clearly wasn't natural to my body. Some of you have reached the same conclusion, right? It didn't take me much study, and some of you aren't going to like this, or aren't going to agree with it, but it didn't take me too much study to understand that animal products weren't natural to the human body. Okay? Now, just for just a moment, if you look at the digestive physiology of animals that eat animals, it's completely different from yours and mine. First of all, animals that eat animals have the tools on their body, fangs and claws, to kill their prey. A wild cat catches its prey and bites through its jugular vein. Anybody here think they could bite through a piece of leather? Because that's what these animal hides are like. Okay, our teeth are not designed for that. Okay? The enzymes in the mouth, the way their jaws move, the length, shape of their digestive tract, the concentration of hydrochloric acid in their stomach. The hydrochloric acid in the stomach of an animal that eats animals is 10 times as strong as yours. If you've ever eaten a single piece of corn or a single sunflower seed and not chewed it up, you can see how weak your acid is. Because that mostly protein passed right through your body completely unchanged. Whereas a snake eats a whole mouse, doesn't chew it up at all, swallows it whole, digests it completely, bones and all, in just a few days. A lion or a tiger, they don't chew their food. Their jaws don't go side to side to grind things up. They go only up and down to tear it off the bone. So a tiger, let's say, bites off a part of an animal and swallows it whole and digests it completely. Much more quickly than you and I can process the food through our system. Okay? We clearly don't have the digestive physiology. Now, you can eat whatever you want, but you should know, and this, by the way, is not new information, because in 1961, the Journal of the American Medical Association published a study that's never been disproven that showed that if you eat animal products, your risk of cancer and heart disease is 5 times higher than if you don't. Do what you like, but just know what you're doing. Okay, sticking our heads in the sand is never helpful. Now again, we've all been led to believe, we've been brainwashed to think we have to get a lot of protein. And so 20 years ago, I was on the board of the Vegetarian Society of Washington, D.C. And it was a crazy thing. You actually had to be a vegan to be on the board. So I was on the board with a bunch of vegans, and they were all animal rights activists. And I love animals, and I believe that we do not have the right to use animals for our own benefit. I try not to use animals in any way. I haven't eaten them in a long time. But these people were militant animal rights activists. The kind of people who would say silly things like, I don't care about myself, I only care about the animals. And I would say, how many animals can you help if you're dead? And you got to take care of yourself, right? So, you just want to understand that whatever your beliefs are about this, if what you're committed to, and this is a good time to check, how many of you are here because you're actually interested in taking your health, if not to perfect, to the highest level possible? Anyone want to do that? It might be easier. Is anyone here not want to do that? Anyone rather be sick, not function very well? No? Okay. So you all want to do that, right? Now let me ask you an entirely different question. How many of you would like to make the world a better place? Yeah? Pretty much everybody? Money is a powerful tool, isn't it? Would you like to have $1 billion in your bank account so you could make the world a better place? Because that's a lot of power, isn't it? You could do a lot of good with that. Raise your hand if you'd like to have $1 billion in the bank. Some of you would not. If you win the lottery, would you please send it to me? Okay. So, now how many of you that raised your hand that would like to have $1 billion in the bank are willing to do what you need to do to get $1 billion in the bank? A couple of you are, but most of us aren't really willing to do that. That might be more than we're willing to borrow, because how many people really want to work like all the time? No thanks, right? And what's my point? My point is everybody wants to be healthier. Everybody wants to be as healthy as possible. Wanting something isn't enough to get it. If you want $1 billion in the bank, you better be committed to creating $1 billion in the bank. And if you want to take your health to the highest level possible, you better be committed to doing that. The first step is to learn what you need to learn, and the second step is to do it no matter how difficult or crazy it seems. Because if you're not willing to do what you need to do, you're not going to get what you said you wanted to have. Does that make sense to you? Okay. Hey, we've been waiting for you. We went ahead and get started anyway, but glad you made it. So, in looking at what did belong in the human body, I'd given up processed foods, I'd given up animal products, and a crazy thing happened. In 6 months' time, just by not consuming animal products and processed foods, my health completely changed. And the change was so dramatic. You know, I never intended to be standing in front of a room full of people talking about health. As I said, I didn't study that. I studied finance. I was in the commercial real estate finance business. And that's what I was doing. And I thought I was going to retire when I was 35 and then go actually live my life. Didn't quite work out that way. Okay, it's just as well. But that's what I thought was going to happen at the time. And so, here I was now, all of a sudden, a completely different person. And people who had known me would walk up to me and say, "Oh my God, you look amazing. What did you do?" Because the change was so dramatic. And then they would say things like, "Could you help my sister or my father or my uncle?" And before I knew it, I was spending more time coaching people on how to get their health back than I was running my own company. And I'm not necessarily the brightest bulb in the box. It took me a few years to realize this wasn't a good way to pay the bills, because I wasn't charging people for helping with their health, but I was spending more time doing that because it was something I really felt good about doing. Some of you probably know who Marshall Rosenberg is. If not, he founded Nonviolent Communication, and he teaches we want to contribute to each other. And here, you know, I had been working for years helping wealthy people get wealthier. it didn't really seem that important to me, like on a global scale. And here I was doing something that felt much more important, and I was much more passionate about it. And so finally I walked away from a very lucrative business to do something that, honestly, in the 16 years I've been running Tanglewood now, I've never gotten paid for. That's my choice. I run the company, but I've invested everything back into the company rather than ever taking a salary. So I live in a room. I currently don't own an operating car. I don't have a bank account. And I'm 52 years old. And, I'm realizing this may not be a good strategy on an ongoing basis. Because at some point I might want to stop working all the time. And it is going to change. But that's how it's been up until now. And I'm not complaining because I've had the privilege of helping a lot of people completely change their physical reality. Okay? And got someone here who spent some time with me but is giving me the evil eye because she does not want to come up in front of the room and speak. That's her. You can talk to her one-on-one if you'd like afterwards about what she saw and experienced herself. And we'll talk more about that later on too. So what I wound up doing is really less important than what I wasn't doing, what I'd given up. I did wind up making massive changes to my diet by giving up the things I mentioned. And before I knew it, this massive shift. And I'm going to pat myself on the back here now. It's not something I do a lot of, honestly. But I know a lot of people. For instance, how many of you are familiar with macrobiotics? Some of you know macrobiotics. I know a lot of people who find macrobiotics, and their disease, whatever their primary reason for going to it, their disease goes away, and they think, therefore I must have found the Holy Grail. This must be as good as it gets. And they stay where they are. In fact, I'll tell you something. I was actually introduced to vegetarianism through macrobiotics. It was nearly 30 years ago. I was single at the time, and my brother-in-law one day said to me, Loren, an old friend of mine, a beautiful old friend of mine, is visiting. Would you like to meet her? I said, yeah, sure. Why not? I'm always happy to meet anybody. So he gave me her phone number, and we met, and we connected. And it turned out she was a macrobiotic chef. Now, some of you, anyone know Washington, D.C.? Across the river is McLean, Virginia. And in McLean, Virginia, the Prince and Princess of Saudi Arabia have a castle. I mean, it's a massive compound. And the Princess of Saudi Arabia was eating a macrobiotic diet. And my friend, she was traveling with some of her entourage, but she had bought a house in Great Falls, Virginia, not a cheap place. This is where a place where houses, back then were $500,000. And the princess had bought a house for her macrobiotic chef to live in. And every day she would send someone the 15 or 20 miles by car to pick up food for the 25 people in their household that were eating a macrobiotic diet that this woman would prepare every single day. Well, the princess was traveling, and so my friend Gina was there temporarily filling in because some of the 25 people were still in the compound, and she was preparing food. And so I was hanging out with her a lot for about a month, and she turned me on to macrobiotic food. But I noticed something interesting. The more people I met who'd been doing macrobiotics for a long time. Well, let me tell you something, first of all, before I move on. I mentioned earlier, 21 years raw vegan. So I can't, how many of you know what macrobiotics really is? Raise your hand. Not so many. Well, so many people I've met have said, oh, raw food, that's like macrobiotics. No, it's just the opposite. Because macrobiotics says, don't eat anything raw. Very little fruit, no salad, everything is cooked, and it's not just cooked, it's cooked for hours until it's all the same color, gray. And so what I started to notice was that the people who've been eating a macrobiotic diet for a number of years, they were all the same color as the food. And I started to think, something's wrong with this picture. Like, they didn't have any color in their cheeks. They were all pale and gray looking. And I thought, now today I can tell you why, right? Because Einstein taught us that energy can be neither created nor destroyed, can only change form. And every single day, your body is creating hundreds of millions of living cells. Maybe billions of new cells. Where's the energy for those new cells going to come from? From this food that's been cooked for 8 hours? And is completely lifeless? Not likely. right? So we create living cells by consuming living food. Every other species on the planet, besides the ones that we feed, consumes all of their food in its natural state. And by the way, which ones are the ones that get as sick as we do? The same ones that are eating unnatural diets just like us. Okay, now diet is not the only factor, but it's a massively important one. And if you want to create healthy living cells, you need to be consuming healthy living food. Okay? We won't talk too much more about that, but this is really an important piece. So I patted myself on the back here because I finally realized, I feel so much better than I had just 6 months earlier, but I knew there was still more available, and I wanted it all. This may sound funny to you, but I consider myself incredibly fortunate that I got as sick as I did at the age of 23. And if you're wondering about that, I'll explain. There are many people here in the room tonight that have been able to take their health more or less for granted throughout their lives. And it's only when people turn 60 or 65 or 70, they wake up one day and all of a sudden they realize that there are like major organ systems that no longer function the way they're supposed to, and they're in deep doo-doo. Okay? But you know what most people do at that point in life? They say, I'm getting old. That's just what happens. And they accept it. But remember, I got sick at 23. I had been active and vibrant and healthy, as far as I knew, up until that point. And so I experienced being sick in a completely different way than people do when they're much older. I saw it for what it really is. It was a complete loss of freedom. I'd lost my ability to use my body and my mind, which no longer functioned very well, the way I wanted to. I'd lost my freedom, and I wasn't willing to live that way. Where so many people just say, this is just what happens. I'm getting older. Okay, so I consider myself incredibly fortunate that it happened when it did, because I wasn't willing to accept anything but the best that was possible. And I came across something that was written by a man named Thomas More, not the Thomas More who's writing today or was writing until recently. I'm not sure if he's still alive or not. There's a contemporary author. But this was a Jesuit scholar who was writing hundreds of years ago. And I came across something he had written where he said, and interesting because he was a Christian, he said, the only real sin is in not maximizing your potential. And that resonated for me. And here I was, I had for several years been functioning at significantly below what was possible for my body and my mind. And I thought, I want that. I want to function at the highest level I possibly can. And so I approached it from a different place. Just before we started, I was introduced to someone here this evening, and the person introducing me said, but Loren's not just a raw foodist. He's pretty radical even for raw foodists. Right? I don't see you. Where are you? There you are. And that's because I've always approached all of it from one perspective. What's optimal for the body. I'm going to tell you something. There are a lot of people eating a lot of stuff that's raw that's not really very healthy for them. So if you want to be as healthy as possible, you have to understand what actually belongs in the body. Okay, raw is a good step, but it's not the end of the line. Okay, it's a good step. You can do better, and the good news is it gets easier, not harder. It doesn't get more complicated, it gets much simpler when we look at what's true and what's real for our bodies. So I continued to think about this and to try to refine what I was doing because I was committed to creating the highest level of health. And I continued to see my health get better and better. And then I came across a book, and this was actually, I'm making it sound like it was more time than it was. It was actually within that first year. I came across a book called Rational Fasting. Anyone read this book? This was a book written by a man named Arnold Ehret. He was a German man, and he was writing this back in the 1920s or 30s, I don't recall now. but he was long dead by the time I found the book. He wasn't around. And there are several people here tonight who are under 30 or 35. So this may come as a surprise to some of you, but back when all this was going on for me, there was no Google. Like, how did people survive? You couldn't just go to your computer and punch in, right, whatever you want. It didn't exist. And so I'm reading a book about fasting by a guy who's dead, and you go to the Yellow Pages, which is all we had back then. There was no fasting listing in the Yellow Pages. I was on my own. And I didn't know if this could... Now, I did have some experience with fasting, a little bit. I'm Jewish, but only on my parents' side. So I'd grown up fasting one day a year. I knew I could survive that. Many people don't think so. Many people seem to think that if they skip lunch, they'll probably die. So we're in Ahwatukee. You're going to drive to North Scottsdale. You better plan out your meals just in case the tire goes flat. What are you going to do? It could be an hour before you get there, right? You got to know what you're going to eat. The fact is that, like every other species on the planet, our bodies are designed to go a long time without eating. Why is that? That's because in nature, we get things like floods and fires and droughts. There are natural conditions that make it impossible for animals to find or obtain food sometimes. So they have to be able to survive on their own reserves. And in fact, if you've never thought about this, this is why we carry the body fat we carry. When I say we, I really mean you. And needless to say, I don't have all that much body fat. But the average person, we measure body fat at my center. And over the last 7 years, I've had the privilege of measuring more than 1,600 people's body fat. And the average woman is somewhere between 30 and 35% body fat that I've seen. The average male, between 25 and 30%. Okay? Anyone know how much fat we actually need to survive? Somewhere between 2 and 2.5%. Yeah. Now, I'm doing pretty well. I tend to run between 5 and 6%. So I've got twice as much as I need. Now, I promise you I wouldn't look very good if I only had half as much as I have now. Okay? I don't want to go there. But most people are carrying much more fat than they need to survive or be healthy. Because we're programmed to do this. See, the body, we haven't evolved. There's been little evolution in terms of how our systems function. The body is still set up for these conditions that occur in nature. Your body doesn't know that within 15 minutes of your house, there are 20 places open 24 hours you can get something to eat. Your body doesn't know that. Your body doesn't know about things like Twinkies, which don't exist anymore now, but although if you still have them, guess what? They'll be good for like 300 years. And that's the thing. See, the body doesn't know that there's substances now you can eat like, in the next millennium, they'll still be edible if they're ever edible. That's debatable. The body doesn't know that. Our bodies developed in an environment where things had a relatively short lifespan. Think about it. Most carnivorous animals, if they come across a dead animal, walk away unless it was recently killed or died. Because it's not good very long. It's not really safe to eat for very long, not healthy for them. Okay? So, that's the reason our bodies store the fat that they store. So that we have reserves, should we need them. And now, how many of you have ever had a sick animal in your house? A cat or a dog or a horse or a giraffe or a donkey or a blue whale? Was it a blue whale?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yes, how did you know?
Something about you just told me. So, was it a cat or dog? Both cat and dog. If your animal gets sick enough or badly enough injured, what will it do?
Stops eating.
It will stop eating. It'll lie down. It won't move. Right? And this is crazy, but no Facebook. No Netflix. It just lays there like a dog or something, right? It just lays there and does nothing because it instinctively knows it needs to rest as completely as possible. And you can put the food right in front of the animal's face and it won't touch it. Because these animals know instinctively something that most people don't know. And moms, it's your fault. Right? Because how many of you when you were sick didn't feel like eating? You lose your appetite. But your mother told you what? You have to eat. And again, I mean, I had a Jewish mother. Right? You have to eat. Some of you know what I'm talking about. So we've been trained to eat even when our bodies are telling us not to. Every other species, they have a major advantage over human beings. Anyone know what that advantage is? It's where they live. Where do they live? Every other species lives in their body. Most people that I know live in the real estate from here up. And if you want to test this theory, ask 20 of your closest friends how they feel. And I'll bet you 15 of them will say something like, well, I think I feel. Which means what? They're thinking, not feeling. Okay? Thinking happens up here, not in the body. So the problem is we've become detached from our body's natural wisdom and intuition. And this was brought home to me in a way that just blew my mind over 30 years ago. I had just transferred from the U.S. Air Force Academy to the University of Delaware. As it happens, at the age of 19, I discovered that I had a congenital knee problem. I woke up one day at 19 years of age and I couldn't bend my knee. And at the time, the Air Force wanted to operate on both of my knees. And some of you may recall, again, this is more than 30 years ago now, right? 33 years ago. Nobody back then, I don't know how it is today, because I don't pay any attention, but back then, nobody got knee surgery one time. Like if they went into your knee, they were going back in there every year or two. It's like, hey, it's that time again. It's time for your annual surgery. Come on in for your knee surgery. No thanks. I told the Air Force, when I couldn't walk anymore, I would start considering surgery. Not until then. Okay? So, and I'll tell you why I tell you that, because, well, we're going to come to that later on. Remind me to tell you why I'm telling you that now, if I forget to tell you why I'm telling you. So, I was realizing all along that I could impact how my body was functioning and what was going on for myself. And in fact, I'll tell you now, because I will forget to tell you, that back then I lived in Colorado, and if I was skiing, which I love to do, I had to have big honking braces on both my knees, because my knees could no longer support my body. And today, not today, because I'm in Arizona and you're a long way from the ocean, but these days I surf. I took up surfing just about 6 months ago at the age of 51 and a half. And I can surf essentially the same motions on skis. I can do that today at nearly 52 when I couldn't do that at 19. Okay? So don't let anyone tell you that your body can't heal, can't improve. It can. But let me back up, because I've sort of been meandering around here, and I started to tell you about fasting, and I began to fast myself, and I knew I could do one day, and so I decided to try 2. And what I did was I pulled up real close to the refrigerator just in case. I didn't know what was going to happen. 2 days seemed like a long time. And when I survived that, I went ahead and tried 4, and then 8, and then I worked my way up until I was fasting for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. And again, I know that sounds crazy to some of you, right? But what I want you to know, and I can tell you now, that in the last 16 years, I have guided more than 2,000 people through the water fasting process. That's actually what we do at the Tanglewood Wellness Center. We are a water-only fasting center. And our average fast is between 24 and 25 days. That sounds like a long time to some of you. Now, Terry back there did 21 days with me. But while she was there, we had one young couple that was only there for 2 weeks. They each fasted 11 days. Everybody else there Almost everybody else did more than 21 days. 26, 28, 32, 42. The average person has between 6 and 8 weeks of reserves. This is not until you die. Okay? This is until you deplete your reserves and begin to starve. Now, if you're very lean, and some of you probably think I'm kind of on the lean side, you go through your reserves more slowly. I don't know if I can fast 6 weeks because I've never tried. Because what happened to me was, I started out coaching people on diet and other lifestyle choices, helping them get healthier, fitness, training, etc. And then I learned about fasting. I started fasting myself, and my coaching clients knew that I was fasting. And they started to petition me. Well, can you take me through the process? And I didn't really feel like I was qualified to do that. So I said no a lot for a while. And as I got more and more experience, I finally said, okay, but I started out taking people for very short fasts, like a week, and only people who weren't really sick. And as I gained more experience, I started taking people for longer times and people with more significant things going on. Now again, today, I can tell you that there are a handful of people alive today who have more fasting experience than I do, but only a handful in the world. Okay, there are very few places you can go to do this. So this is not something that's common or there's a lot of expertise. I am one of the people that has more expertise than most that you'll ever meet, and I've seen some amazing things happen. And the reason that fasting is so powerful is primarily based on an idea that comes from a school of thought called natural hygiene. Some of you familiar with natural hygiene? Mm-hmm. So natural hygiene is all about understanding and applying the laws of nature to our own bodies. And natural hygiene has always postulated that there is only one disease, which is toxemia. Okay? It's a toxic body. Now, if you smoke cigarettes for 40 or 50 years, you're taking toxic particulate matter into your lungs. It's likely to develop into lung cancer or emphysema, but it's a toxic substance. If you've been drinking excessively alcohol for a long time, it might be liver cancer, liver disease, cirrhosis of the liver, but it's toxicity from the alcohol. Okay? Every disease, they would say, is toxicity. And I believed that for a long time. I know today it still plays a massively important role. And what we see most of the time when people are fasting is the elimination of toxicity. Now, raise your hand if you eat a mostly raw vegan diet. Some of you in the room? Quite a few. That's wonderful. Congratulations. I often hear people say or have people tell me that a raw vegan diet healed their body. So I want to share with you just briefly a simple idea here. Okay? The raw vegan diet has never healed anyone, and it's never going to. No diet can ever heal your body. Juices can't heal you. Green smoothies can't heal you. Supplements and superfoods can't heal you either. Why is that? That's because every organism is self-healing. The organism, the body, does all the healing, not the substance. Now, what's true about the most optimal diet is that the optimal diet is a diet that meets the body's needs as well as possible without contributing to a problem. Most of the stuff that most people are eating every day is actively contributing to their toxic load. It's actually helping them to create disease. An optimal diet isn't going to heal you, but it's going to allow you to get out of your body's way so it can heal itself better. Okay, that's what an optimal diet is. Just an important side note. So you want to understand that even people who've been eating a raw vegan diet for a long time can still benefit from giving the body this concentrated opportunity to cleanse and heal itself. And I'll tell you just one quick story. About 12 years ago, anyone familiar with the Portland International Raw and Living Food Festival? Do you remember that, Jeff? This was back 12, 13, 14, 15 years ago. It started. And I was a speaker. I didn't go to the first one. I was invited to speak at the second, third, and fourth ones. Again, a long time ago. And I met a guy there at my first or second one who was still a very close friend of mine. And he left there with something that I left on the back table. Terry, would you do me a favor? See that brown notebook? Would you hold that up, please? That one has no labels on it. That's called the Creating Perfect Health System. And it came with more than 15 hours. Is anybody here having any fun tonight so far? Yeah? Because you guys are awfully... Is this like an Arizona thing? You're all kind of quiet. You can laugh and enjoy yourself. It's okay. If you're enjoying this and you find this valuable, that program contains more than 15 hours of me live teaching in lectures and seminars. And if you're hating me, then don't get it, right? Because you won't enjoy it. It also has about 40 written pages of material. And we no longer offer it in physical form. Now it's only digital form. That's a long story, but short version. A year and a half ago, I lost everything and got on a bus with 2 suitcases to start over. And all of my inventory was in my place in Panama, which was the Panamanian legal system. It's a little bit. I was in a contract dispute, and my adversary paid off the judge. We had an open and shut case. We had a valid contract they refused to comply with, and I lost everything that I and the center owned. And it's okay because, again, I feel very fortunate to A, live in the tropics, B, have access to amazing food every single day. B, C, I think we're on C now, right? C, you see these things here? These are called pants. I never wear these in Costa Rica. I wear shorts and flip-flops pretty much every day and not much else, and that's the way I like it. But, you know, I feel very fortunate to be able to do what I do. But I'm telling you that program, this guy had left that event with that physical program. So he had tons of information from me. And I would see him, because he was an author, he still is an author, and I would see him at events. Back then I was speaking, traveling a lot. I'd go to New York, he'd be there. You know, I'd go to San Francisco, he'd be there. And every time I saw him, every time we would speak, I would say, when are you going to come spend a month with me? And he would say, Loren, I don't need to fast. I'm doing everything that you teach I should be. I'm eating your diet. I'm doing everything I should be doing. Why would I need to fast? And I couldn't convince him that it might benefit him. I finally did 2 years ago. It took me 10 years to get him to come down. And an interesting thing happened. Every day, while my guests are there, I check each person's vital signs. We talk about what's going on. We want to make sure everyone's safe. And we want to make sure everyone understands what's happening, because you don't always feel great while your body's cleansing and healing itself. And so you want to understand what's going on. And we spent a lot of time going through all that. And so when it was his turn, I took his vital signs and I said to him, Jeff, is anything different today than it was yesterday? And he said, yeah. He said, my urine has started to smell like photographic developer. Now, if you've ever developed photographs, there's a chemical bath you put these things in, and it's a nasty chemical, right? You know this stuff? Yeah, it's nasty stuff. And I said, well, that's hardly surprising. You're a photographer. You know, if you work with the chemical, you're breathing in the fumes, maybe you get it on your skin, you've got it into your body, it's in your system. And he said, yeah, but Loren, he said, I don't develop my own photographs. Oh, well, that's kind of curious. So I said to him, have you ever developed your own photographs? And his response was, yes, my father was a photographer. I grew up with a darkroom in my house, but I haven't touched this chemical in more than 40 years. Okay, so for more than 40 years, he carried this chemical in his body, and for the last 10 of them, he'd been eating an optimal diet and had eliminated none of it. And after 1 week of fasting, his body is dumping this chemical. And by the end of 2 weeks, it was out of his system. Okay, so why is this process so powerful? Why does this happen? Well, first of all, why does every animal instinctively lie down and stop eating? Well, it turns out that processing food requires more energy than anything else we ever do. More than 50% of your energy every day. Well, not if I'm drinking juices, right? It turns out that as soon as you consume anything, you put it in your mouth, your body says, oh, what is that? because what it wants to do is prepare your stomach and digestive tract for what's about to come. So guess what? This happens if you're chewing a piece of gum. Okay? If you're putting some lemon in your water. Your body says there's food coming, and roughly 30% of your energy is shunted towards your digestive tract. No matter what you're consuming, you're expending roughly 50% or more of your daily energy processing that substance through your system. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter how clean the diet is. You're still putting most of your energy into processing food. Every animal instinctively knows this, and knows that if it wants to heal, it has to stop eating. And that's no problem because it has the reserves. So how many of you have ever seen the Planet Earth series of documentaries? Weren't they amazing, Etta? Yeah. Anyone else see these? Yeah, a couple of you. You remember the first one? It was called Pole to Pole, and it opened with a polar bear emerging from her den. She's been underground for 5 months. For 5 months, she's had nothing to eat and nothing to drink. And while she was in there, she's birthed 2 cubs and has been feeding them her own milk, consuming nothing for 5 months. How does she do that? What do you think? Exactly. That's why she had all that. Well, she also needs fat because it's kind of cold up there around the North Pole, but she was living on her fat stores. Remember, that's why we have them. The body breaks down that fat and gets virtually everything it needs. And it's an interesting thing because there's no water in fat, not while it's on your body. But when your body is breaking it down, one of the byproducts of metabolizing fat is pure water. So all of her water needs are met from her own fat stores. I'm going to tell you a little later why this doesn't work so well for human beings. It doesn't work so well for human beings. Isn't that true, Terry? Did you need to drink some water while you were there with me? You did, yeah, just a little bit. All right? We'll talk about why that is. So, it sounds crazy, it sounds radical to most people, but the fact is, we're all walking around with the reserves that we need to see the body through weeks of not eating, as long as we're resting, which is what this is really about. And people miss this all the time. I mean, you know, there are groups on Facebook, and people say, well, I'm fasting for 42 days, and I'm still working, and working out, and taking care of my kids. In fact, last year, someone posted this on one of these groups, and I wrote in and said, you know, Mary, you might want to rest a little more than that. And she said, well, you don't have to own a fasting center to know how to fast. There's lots of ways to fast. Okay, do what you like. If you don't want to get, you don't want comments, then you might not want to post this on a public site, though. The fact is that the reason we have to stop eating is so we can liberate energy, so the body can use that energy for cleansing and healing the body. So if we're not eating, not taking any energy in, but we're still being just as active as we were before, we're not only not going to do much cleansing and healing, we're going to harm the body. Because your body is very intelligent, and it's always living according to something called the law of efficiency. And the law of efficiency states that in every moment, every organism is attempting to get the most benefit for the least amount of effort. In fact, you probably do this at work, in your relationships. Right? This is the way we operate. So this is why the lions always go after which gazelle? The injured one, maybe. The weakest one, maybe. The slowest one. It might be slowest because it's injured or weakest or sick or stupid, you know, or just bored and lazy, whatever. But they're going after the one that's behind the rest of them because it's the easiest one to catch. And they all taste the same. Like chicken, I understand. And so they don't, you know, it's like there's no ego. I mean, can you imagine like one probably 16-year-old lion saying to another one, watch this, I'm going to go catch the fastest gazelle. No. Okay, they just want lunch, and they want it for the smallest expenditure of energy possible. Well, our bodies want to do the same thing in every moment. And so when we stop eating, the body is going through a whole series of physiological changes that allow its needs to get met in the most efficient way possible. And so what that means is we start with what's in the digestive tract, we move to glycogen, a glucose precursor, glycogen reserves in the liver. We then go where you want to go. Where would you like to go next? Body fat. Guess what's more efficient than fat for providing energy to the body? Muscle. So your body begins to break down muscle. Now it only does this primarily muscle for a relatively short period of time. How long depends on your body composition. Your body is very intelligent. So if it's been 2 or 3 days and nothing's come in and you're running out of muscle, or you're not even running out because it's a tiny amount that gets consumed, but your body will say, okay, you know what, that's enough muscle. Now let's go to a less efficient but safer long-term source of fuel. Adipose tissue, long-term fat stores, forever. Okay. Lays down and doesn't move when it's fasting because it's injured. If it was better to be walking around and doing exercise, animals would be doing that, right? That's my reasoning. So that's all I needed to know. But that's, so you have the facts, that's what happens. So as long as you're resting completely, the reserves are there, and amazing things happen because your body is able to put most of its energy, all that energy saved from not digesting anything, all the energy saved from not moving around, can now be used for cleansing and healing your body. So what happens? What's possible as a result of that? Pretty much everything. Okay? Now, I should say, right, little caveat here, okay, what I'm talking about here won't necessarily help everyone. All right? So, if you're sitting here tonight and you're already dead, this isn't going to help you. Okay? But if you're not quite dead yet, see, because the body was designed to cleanse and heal itself, it was designed to regenerate, and when it has the opportunity and the conditions, that's what happens. So, I believe it's something like 70% of Americans over the age of 60 now have hypertension. This is a major problem. And the pharmaceutical companies are working hard to resolve this problem, right? What do you think? No, this is a cash cow. The pharmaceutical companies have no interest in curing your conditions or your neighbor's conditions or your grandmother's conditions. What they want to do is keep people alive and sick, because dead people don't buy drugs and healthy people don't buy drugs. Okay, they're not interested in health, they're interested in business, and you need to understand this. Okay, don't be relying on people. You know, in fact, if someone tells you they have something you need, or you need this thing and I happen to have it, you have a right and a responsibility to be a little skeptical. And that includes me. So I'm sitting here telling you, this is the single most powerful thing you can do for your body. You have a right and a responsibility to be skeptical. If it doesn't make sense to you, you're not comfortable with it, or you're not comfortable with me, please don't come to my center. I'm only interested in working with people that are actually committed to their health and that are coachable and willing to follow directions. Because I'll tell you something, I wind up being more invested in most people's health than they are. And that doesn't work very well. I want to be working with people as partners who are willing to do what they need to do. Whenever I get somebody that says, you know, whatever I say, they say, I know, I think, oh, I'm in trouble. If they already know everything, you know, I'm in big trouble, right? The first thing we need to do is what Buddhism calls, anyone know? Beginner's mind. So whatever we approach as if we know nothing, because most of the time we actually know pretty close to nothing anyway. So if we approach it from that perspective, then we're actually open to learning. If we think we know, we can't learn very much. We can't grow very much. Okay. But what we've seen so far with hypertension in the last 16 years, over 170 people, I can't remember the exact number, but over 170 people now, 100% success eliminating hypertension. Every single time. 4 weeks at the center or more, they leave with below normal blood pressure. Shelley wasn't there when you were there, was he? but you've seen his process on YouTube. Some of you may have seen this. Anyone see Shelley's interviews on YouTube? This is a guy who I've known for a long time, but in fact, when I first met him on a lecture tour like this one, 12 or 13 years ago in Boston, he began following what I was teaching. And then he got derailed somewhere along the way, as happens sometimes. And when he contacted me last year, he had gained well over 100 pounds in the previous year. He was 370 pounds. His blood pressure was 225 over 135. By the time he left my center, he had lost 100 pounds, and his blood pressure was roughly 109 over 70, which means he went from having, well, he was essentially assured of a heart attack or stroke. In fact, his 5 years older brother, his father, his grandfather, his uncle had all died of heart attacks. He had already had, at the age of 40, 42, he had already had 2 mini strokes as a result of his condition. He completely eliminated any risk of heart disease or stroke as a result of what he did. Okay? We've had 100% success with type 2 diabetes. 100%. Now, these things are relatively easy compared to what I'm about to share with you. We've seen the same kind of success rate with Lyme disease, with multiple sclerosis, with lower GI tract problems. These are conditions that, according to medicine, are incurable. Well, every friggin' thing is incurable if you just throw poison at it. Of course the body doesn't heal. In fact, how many of you know someone, let's look at hypertension just as an example. How many of you know someone with hypertension? Pretty much everybody here, right? And if it's you, or you know the details, you probably know that they were told, you can take this medication for how long? For the rest of your life. Forever. Create. If you're committed. Your body was designed to function at an amazingly high level. And if you're willing to do what you need to do, you can create something incredible. And so in the 26 years since I took responsibility for my health, I haven't been sick one single day. Not a cold, not a headache, not a flu. When my body needs to heal, and it sometimes has needed to heal, I've seen amazing things happen. I don't know if I have time to really get into one of those stories now. We're actually supposed to be finishing up now, but I know we started a little late, so I'll tell you what, I'll post it on YouTube at some point. So I'm getting some encouragement back there to tell the story. But what I want to do is I want to wrap this up and maybe take a couple of questions. But I want to share with you that, I've had personal experiences of healing that I've been told shouldn't be possible. Okay, not supposed to happen. That shouldn't be possible. I also just realized that there were a couple of things I told you I would talk about. The flyer said I would talk about that I haven't talked about yet. So one of them, which I could have mentioned a long time ago, we were talking about diet. It said on there, if you anyone see this, anyone worried about that? Yeah, you want me to cover what I said I'd cover? Okay. Darn, I hate when that happens. I promised you I would talk about why the standard American diet is like a bicycle that's been hit by a train. You ever see anything hit by a train? There's not much left, right? But you see, if you're sitting here tonight and you would like to take your health from wherever it is to the highest level of health and vitality possible, you need to find a vehicle that will get you there. And we have a very intelligent group here tonight. I know this. You know how I know this? Well, the most intelligent people always come to hear me speak. So, the intelligent people that I know always do the same thing. What we tend to do is we say, yeah, I know that a standard American diet is crap, so I'm going to fix it. I'm going to substitute this low-fat version for that thing, and I'm going to substitute this whole-grain version for that thing, and I'm going to substitute this, non-sugar version for that thing. And this comes back to the bicycle. You see, a standard American diet or if you're not from the U.S., the standard diet of wherever you're from, is about as useful a vehicle as a bicycle that's been run over by a train. You can't fix it. There's no sense in trying to make it better. What you want to do instead is find a vehicle that actually works. Okay? And that vehicle is what we would be doing if we lived in our natural habitat, in nature. I basically told you already what that is. I was asked before we started if I could get into the fitness piece, and I said I wouldn't say much about it, but I'm going to say something that's shocking to many people. I know I look pretty lean, and I am pretty lean, but I'm also pretty powerful. I'm pretty strong, and surprisingly so. And the crazy thing that surprises a lot of people is I don't work at it. I do very little working out. Now, most people out there talking about health are telling you have to work out X number of hours or minutes, right? How many of you have or have ever had a cat? So your cat, unless it was very young, very small, or very old, could probably easily jump onto the kitchen counter, which would be like you or I jumping onto the roof of a two-story building. Now, they have different anatomy than we do. We're not the same. You know, and I don't know about you, I never jump on two-story buildings anymore if there are people watching, because like I can be there all day trying to explain how that's possible. So, but the fact is, you know how your cat maintains this incredible strength? You probably didn't realize this, but when you go to work in the morning, your cat does like 200 squat thrusts, you know, and then it runs like 4 miles, and then it comes back and, you know, it does leg presses, and actually, the cat sleeps 16 hours a day. Never ever wakes up and says, oh, 7 o'clock, time for an hour of yoga. Never ever. No animal. You ever see in a documentary, a nature video, like the gorilla picking up the big rock 20 times and putting it back down? No! This is stupid. This is an inefficient use of energy. Animals don't do this. What they do is they live their busy, active lifestyles. I mean, what they don't do is get up, get in a car, go sit at a desk, come home, sit in front of a TV. They don't do that. They move. They use their bodies all the time. But that's really all we have to do. Caveat, once we get to a healthy body composition. I used to tell people you'd never have to work out at all, as long as you're physically active. And then about 8 years ago, our internship program changed to include a mandatory 5-day-a-week, 1-hour-a-day exercise class with me. And I can be a hard ass if I want to. And I was shocked to see how few push-ups the average 25-year-old man could do. I was shocked to see how short a time the average woman could support her body hanging from a bar. I mean, a baby monkey can support its body weight with one hand, no problem. And like all day long. And very few human beings can do that for 2 minutes. And so I realized that I needed to help people develop the proper body composition. You have to develop the strength. Because if you don't have proper body composition, your body does not function the way it's supposed to. But once you develop that, if your body is functioning at the highest level possible, maintaining it is no more work for you than it is for any other species on the planet. Why would it be? And so I maintain strength and flexibility with very little effort. So I do believe in interval training for those people that need to get there, right? But, you know, and listen, if you like running marathons, you might want to see somebody about that. But, I mean, that's fine. If you enjoy that, that's fine. If you like doing long bike rides, you know, that's fine. Do what you enjoy doing. But don't kid yourself that running 26 miles at one time is actually a healthy thing for your body. It's not. Just be clear about that. Do what you enjoy doing, but let's be honest. Let's be real about this. Okay? So find the things you enjoy doing and do those things. And develop your body in such a way that it can do whatever you want it to do. I mean, you know, it's crazy, but I've been body surfing my entire life. I swam competitively for 15 or 16 years. I played water polo in college. I boxed and wrestled. But I'd never really surfed. And I finally got on a surfboard 4 or 5 months ago for the first time. I took a lesson, and the waves were pretty nice. This is in Costa Rica. And I spent 2-3 hours surfing without stop. And I used to windsurf, so standing on the board, the balance, I've also practiced yoga for 25 years. It was easy for me. The balance was not an issue. But the surfers, who like the good surfers who are out there, they'd surf a while and go out and rest. I was out there for hours on end. Okay? That's the kind of energy that you can create at any age if you're willing to do what you need to do. So what I want to share with you is that's what's possible. And I wanted to bring it back around before I forget. So the toxicity is a major piece. But what I finally realized was the reason people are so toxic is because they're dehydrated. The reason that animals don't have to drink water when they fast is because they live in their body. So unless they've been in really unusual conditions, they're already hydrated because they're meeting their body's needs. But most people aren't. How do we get so dehydrated in the first place? Anyone here ever eat a bag of corn chips? Never? Yeah? Once or twice? How much water would you guess is in those corn chips? Zero. Let's be scientific. Let's say 0, give or take 0. Okay? It's approximately 0. Right? When the corn chips come back out of your body, having completed their little journey, are they as dry as when they went in? You better hope not. That would not be a pleasant experience. So they go in completely dry and they come out wetter than when they started. Where's the water coming from? It's coming from your body. You see, there are animals on the planet that eat animals, and we talked about that. The lion will take the gazelle by the neck, bite through its jugular vein, and then the first thing it does after they would know, drinks all the blood as the animal's bleeding out. Blood is mostly water. Then it rips it open and eats the water-rich internal organs. Then it eats the muscle, which is only 65% water maximum, 65-70%, they say, if the lion doesn't cook it first. Because what do most people do? Most people take a hunk of meat, cook most of the water out of it, put it between 2 dry pieces of bread, accompany it by a plate full of dry chips covered with salt, which take water out of the body, and then chase it down with a cup of coffee, a beer, or a cup, or a soda, all of which are diuretics, which means the body loses water. They're wet. It feels like you're quenching your thirst, but you're losing water when you consume these things. That's how we get dehydrated. Why don't we get hydrated eating the perfect diet? Because we don't. Doesn't work. I've had the opportunity to measure the hydration level of many people eating a perfect diet. What I call a perfect diet. They're not hydrated, most of them. Why not? There are 5 major channels of elimination to eliminate toxins from the body. What are they? Through the skin, through the kidneys, right? Urinary tract, the colon, breathing, mucous membranes. What all these channels have in common is they all depend on adequate amounts of water. Without water, nothing moves. Water is the universal transport medium in the body. If the body's dehydrated, nothing's moving. Okay? So, no matter how clean the average person's diet is, or an individual person's diet is, until they give the body a chance to really clean itself out, they're not going to get hydrated. I see people all the time that tell me, I'm hydrated because I live on mostly fruit, or I'm hydrated because I drink 8 gallons of green smoothies every day. Okay? Or I've had people tell me I'm hydrated because I drink alkaline water, special waters. Doesn't make any difference. Until you get the body clean, you're not going to get fully hydrated. And the experts don't agree with me because who are they measuring? Who are they seeing? average people. They don't see people like me. There aren't very many. You can be. Anybody can be. Okay? But what you need to do is get your body clean and then consume a high...
Hey everyone! So it was just getting really good and my battery died. So I took notes and I'm going to go over kind of what he talked about. Of course it's not the same as Loren Lockman speaking, but you can kind of get the gist of it. Okay, so basically his whole speech was an intro to perfect health, right? We had discussed about his journey for a lot. There was one point that it stopped because it got full, then I had to take it off and delete some stuff, and then I just put it back in. I was like, a minute. Anyways, basically he said, you know, this whole thing is about managing symptoms versus creating health. I think you got the gist of that from the video. Is it's your body can heal itself. It's stuff I talk about all the same time too. So I'm going to skip over a lot of this. He basically talked about telling people that once they get home, they need to go get a bouquet of flowers, a card, go to the doctor and say, thank you, but I'm never going to see you again because I learned how to heal myself, right? If you could do that, I would too. And it's all about, you know, speaking your truth. Even though he probably stepped on a lot of people's toes, I probably stepped on a lot of people's toes too, who are like, hey, you know what do you know? But it's sharing your truth, and honestly, medical advice is dangerous today. People, it's all they hear, and it's cut this out, cut that out, and it's not optimal for health. You're not helping your body by cutting anything out at all. And so basically he said you can get farther by, instead of putting this on the doctor, you know, take your health issues on yourself and learn. And you're the only one who can change your health. A doctor can't, pills can't, pharmaceuticals can't. You are the only one who can take charge and heal yourself. And so he talked about how 7 years ago they started doing bioanalysis testing. This is the really interesting part. And started measuring cellular hydration. And they had 9 weeks on, 4 weeks closed, and while they were closed, he had like 3 or 4 students and 2 staff members, and they started measuring them and started realizing that they were around 72 to 76% hydrated water was content. And he's like, that's pretty normal. And people started coming into the clinic and they started measuring them, and they started getting 60, 50, 55, 44%, 40% hydration in the body. Now you remember that your body's supposed to be 70 to 80% water, right? That's normal. Most people are very severely dehydrated today, and they're not measured this way because they're measured compared to normal standards of people in the American diet, which he talks about as well too. But it's crazy how, you know, think about it, even with dehydrated raw foods and cooked foods, is instead of taking in, let's say like an orange, which would be equivalent to like 3 ounces of water, 3 or 4 ounces when you juice it, right? You're taking in these live foods, you're taking that in. Instead, when you're eating cooked foods, you're taking in these cooked foods, and instead of taking in 20 ounces of water, you're taking away 20 ounces of water. So now you're 40 ounces of water behind, and most people aren't even taking in the right type of water, which we'll get to that later. So he went into a bit how they measured in like lean tissue in people. He says he's helped 1,600 different people water fasting. Only 3 people he's ever measured have been properly hydrated. It's pretty crazy, right? And it's interesting how you do it the right way, eating fruits, and he mainly advocates just like a fruit, natural, hygienic diet. You are very hydrated. He's only had like 2 or 3 glasses of water in the last 5 weeks traveling. It's because he's getting his water as pure as possible, processed by the plant. And it's intriguing, for sure. Most people are 15% lower than they should be in hydration. And now think about this and the impact it has on your organs. You have 5 major organs: your liver, your brain, your organs, or your liver, your brain, your kidneys, your lungs, and your heart. Okay, if you're dehydrated, your body is going to be taking water to make sure these organs are functioning optimally. Well, they're not optimal. So how's that going to affect the rest of your body? It's going to continue to just dehydrate. And so 30 to 40% low when you get into your older age, like 65 and over, 100% of people over 65 in Scottsdale, for example, have eyesight problems. And when you're aging, he basically links it to dehydration, which we know as well, you know. So like wrinkled skin, hearing, teeth, balance, shrinking, it all can be measured basically by the cartilage, which is all water, is dehydrated, and your cells are dehydrated, you're toxic, degenerative back issues, joint problems, you just don't have enough water, and that's with everything. You need to be hydrated. Water is so important, and hydration is, especially in raw foods and healing yourself, and that's a huge part of that. I'm just going really fast, because I don't want you guys to have to listen any longer. Okay, every symptom your body creates is on purpose. You know, it's, he says it in so many different ways, but it's the truth. It's just, your body doesn't create these things because it feels like it. If you have cancer, if you have issues of any kind, it's a message from your body, and you can heal yourself by living a very purified, high fruit, high water content, very clean lifestyle. Okay, so have you ever seen a wrinkled cow in nature? No, that one took me for a spin. Not unless it's leather. When it's dead, it becomes wrinkled. When it's alive, you never see a wrinkled cow. Animals, compared to humans, they live in their body, and they really follow that. So, chronic dehydration, wrinkles, aging. Let's see, he had his mother there for 16 days. It took him like years and years to convince her to go. But she was gnarled from arthritis and had a whole bunch of different health problems, and she was on a water day fast for 16 days, left, 50% everything cleared up. She'd been taking medications for 55 years, and she was like 70 years old now. She was completely off them at the end of the 16 days. He had another person, the oldest person, his point was that you're never too old to start healing. Guy who turned 91 while he was there, he water fasted for 32 days, and they ended up refeeding him for 10 days, and he had tumor. He had cancer of the larynx, and he had a huge tumor on it, and the doctors were like, we need to cut that out. We need to cut that out. And he's like, you know what, I have nothing to lose, I'm gonna go do this, and dramatically transformed. Once he stepped off the plane, his son and the doctors were basically waiting for them. They took him to the hospital, cut in, they couldn't find a tumor. 32 days, maybe 40, he was gone, tumor disappeared. Alkalize, detoxify, heal your body. And so you basically have two choices. You're never too old, and you're never too sick unless you're dead. You can start changing right now. And so the two things that you have to decide are, one, are you committed? And two, are you willing to let yourself have it? Because like he said, most people, they don't want to allow themselves to be healthy and happy, and until you can accept that and really see your worth and what's possible, you're not going to heal. You can create anything you want to create if you're committed. That's just the truth of life. Law of attraction with your health. If you want to get vibrant energy, feel amazing, you can do it all. Water, it's like, you compare the standard American diet to a bicycle that's been hit by a train. It doesn't matter if you're trying to clean up the standard American diet, saying I'm going to take processed foods and fill it with whole wheat or something like that. You need to find a good vehicle that can take you there. It talks about exercise, which is super interesting. Talked about water some more, like I just talked about that. Diuretics, salt, water, vinegars, they're all dehydrating. Get off them, in his words. I agree, you don't need them. Someplace, even if it's not his place, go for a month, you know, fast. It's very, very healing. Exercise-wise, God, talked for a long time. These are questions. Okay, so exercise-wise, it's very intriguing. If you look at Blue Corona and a lot of these older raw foodists, they don't do a lot of exercise, but they're very fit and they're very strong, because on a cellular level, these foods speak to our bodies and they keep us very agile and healthy. But he also talked about your animals. You know, your cat doesn't do as soon as you walk in the door, it doesn't start doing like squats, and it doesn't start doing like hip thrusts and push-ups and stuff. That's just silly. But because in nature, animals are moving their bodies. A cat might sleep for 16 hours a day, but he's moving his body, her, him, whatever, moving their body. And it's how you should be. It's playing. There's no such thing as exercise. Whatever type of movement feels good for you, just do it. Get out there and move. That's what it's about. Okay, talks about that. Ugh. This one question, this lady, good friend of mine, she asked that she has a very good friend who, they took out her entire colon and replaced it with a J pouch. I have never heard of this before. If you have information on that, you should post it below, because I'm interested in looking and hearing about that. Stupid doctors. Okay. And she was wondering how that, in comparison to, my cat's being weird, that in comparison to other surgeries and how that can help heal, and it's just, they took out her entire colon. And that's the difference between allopathic and like holistic medicine and living, is you don't cut these things out of the body. They're in there for a reason. They can heal themselves. Stop cutting them out. Like, I had my tonsils removed when I was like 4 years old. It's because I grew up on dairy and processed foods and meats. That's all I ate. It wasn't necessary. If I would have learned how to heal then. So, it talks about what resting would actually be like. I talked to one lady that actually was there, and I talked to her a while ago to Fruit Luck. Anyways, you abstain from all types of energy draining things, honestly. You rest like an animal in nature would. If a dog got sick, a cat got sick, if a mountain lion got sick, whatever it was, they would lay there and they would just let their body rest. Dr. Morse talks about a really interesting one. They're documenting it on the Discovery Channel or Animal Planet, and this mama cat with her cubs, she ended up getting attacked by like wild hyenas or something, and they killed the cubs, and she was so severely injured she just laid there for like a week. But after a week, she just got up, shook herself off, and took off trotting. Like, let yourself heal. It's pretty amazing. Even conscious projects, the visual cortex can process 60,000 bits of info every single time your eyes are open. So he really recommends, if you're fasting, you need to be abstaining from all types of energy draining things, basically. Your brain is the second largest energy source, and you need to be physically inactive and let yourself heal. It's a thing, I'm totally guilty of it as well too, but when we fast, we try to work out, go to school, go to work, take care of your family, blah, blah, blah. If you're gonna heal, you really need to be putting your energy on healing. Cut out the distractions, rest, meditate. No reading a book, nothing, just be. Let it all go. Water versus juicing. He has a point with fasting traditionally means the complete abstinence of all food. Juicing is a natural food to the body. There's no fiber. I can understand that. And there are nutrients that are lost when you remove the fiber. Totally agree. But when it comes to greens and leafy juices, you're much better juicing them, in my opinion, because they're a lot easier to digest by the body. And your body has to work to process every single thing. 50% of your energy is to process foods, therefore you should fast on water when you get up to that level, and you'll go even farther. Water, blah, 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 person to person varies. Okay, so that was a lot of notes I just flew through because it's really late here. But that was Loren Lockman, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully you enjoyed the parts of his speaking that I was actually able to capture. I'm sorry for being so weird talking right now, but it's been a very long day, and it's been lovely speaking to you guys. It would be nice to have it on the other side as well too, but whatever. And so, I'm going to cut that out. That's Loren Lockman. He's a really amazing person. I was very honored to meet him. I'm pretty sure someday I'll do a water fast with him. Sounds like a great retreat place. Be going to Costa Rica, because that's where he moved. But also, if you made it to the end of this video, I'll be going to Costa Rica as well soon too. Okay, I was going to wait to tell you guys, but I'll be working at Finca de Vida, a raw and vegan retreat place there for 3 months minimum, and so there's going to be some really great videos and recipes and stuff coming up there, and it should be really fun. I'm excited. Okay, thanks for watching. Hopefully you were able to take some interesting information from this video. Please subscribe to this channel. I promise I can usually talk without stumbling over myself all the time. And enliven yourself with fruits and veggies. Visit mandybloomsraw.com and amandafrelick.com for more information, recipes, using spiritual stuff, and whatever. Namaste. Bye.